once I got here, they told me I have to teach a psychology lesson. I was just about to watch Betty Boop, so I'm kind of angry. But I'm not going to take it out on you too much. Did you see that behind me? It says, when you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. That's right, read it. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. I see you smirking there. You're sitting there laughing. And you know why you're laughing? I'll tell you why you're laughing. You're laughing because you don't know what it's like to hunker down in a foxhole with cancer shots flying over your head. But I do, and I ain't smirking. And you know why I'm smirking? Because you don't know what it's like to run for cover when the Luftwaffe come in for a strafing run. But I do, and I ain't smirking. And one more reason you know why you ain't smirking, why you smirking? You're smirking because you don't know what it's like to watch a comrade get so angry at losing at poker to a Dutch resistance fighter that he eats his own head. It's hard to even imagine, but I know what that's like, and I ain't smirking. So, I don't want to take it out on you, but do not ride with Hitler. Whoops, you don't ride with Hitler. Don't ride alone or you'll be riding with Hitler. On that note, I'm going to get on to teaching psychology. Happy to have you here. That's right. Here we go. Psychology. And what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about, as you see behind me now, we're going to talk about the biological perspective. The biological perspective. So, let me do that. Let me do what? I'm in front of it. There's a soldier in front of the screen. Get out in front of the screen, soldier. All right, anyway, guys, welcome to psychology. We're going to start now with biological perspective. Biological perspective. It's a very, very important perspective, very relevant perspective. We're going to be talking about it for quite a while. It's the first part of the IB curriculum. I don't necessarily have to do it in this order, but I think biological is probably the best thing to get out of the way first. All right? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is. And today, in this first lesson, we're going to look a little bit at evolution. I'm going to give you the first studies that you guys are going to look at. I'm going to link one video, a short video, maybe 10 minutes, not even that, 5 minutes, for you guys to watch. Kind of interesting. But anyway, so we're going to talk about the biological perspective, and here we go. And so what you see there is, what is it about? What is the biological perspective? Now, let me say this. There's three main perspectives in psychology, IB psychology. I've talked about this with you guys before. There's biological perspective, cognitive perspective, and social perspective. All right? Those are the three ones. We're also going to do abnormal psychology. Anyway, so we're going to talk about biological now. There's a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. I don't mean necessarily today, but there is a lot. And so what that means is that you guys are going to have to get a notebook and take notes and know the things and read in the corresponding chapters, with this sort of remote learning that we're doing. So anyway, what is the biological perspective about? Well, it's how the brain and other physiological processes affect and govern behavior. So we're going to learn a lot of brain anatomy. We're going to learn a lot of the terms, specific terms about different things going on in the brain, such as neurotransmitters, different neurotransmitters, and axons and synapses, and all kinds of stuff. I'm going to talk about some terminology later, but we're not going to get into that today. But anyway, it's how the brain and other physiological processes affect and govern behavior, which is important. We are going to study neuroscience. What is neuroscience? It's the science involving the neurons of the brain. Okay? Anyway, so it studies how the brain's processes and other physiological functions are the basis for our behavior, sensory experiences, emotions, and our thoughts. This is a word. Many of you probably know it. Physiological functions. That means it's the functions of the body. The functions of the body. Okay? And in this case, the brain specifically. But we also talk about hormones. and things like that. And we will talk about pheromones just a little bit. Okay. Anyway, we're going to talk about genetics and behavior, and we're going to talk about evolution and behavior. And these are all very, very important things. Some are more important in terms of sort of affecting and you know, basically affecting behavior than others. Anyway, so there we go. Probably evolution is the least important as far as our everyday, day-to-day behavior. But in any event, so here we go. So we're going to take a look first. I thought about doing this a little bit differently, but I'm going to start kind of like I would normally start. And we're going to talk about evolution and behavior. We're getting into the first one. Now, let me explain something to you just a bit. How are the IB exams built up? What do you have to know? I will talk more about this in class, and I can talk about this on, you know, when we have our Zoom meetings. But the IB exams are built up with a paper 1, a paper 2, and a paper 3. All right? Now, higher level only deals with paper 3. That has to do with qualitative research methodology. And as a matter of fact, this year, because of COVID, we're not going to have a paper 3. Paper 1 talks about the main perspectives. There are 3 8-point questions in the beginning and 1 22-point question. You choose one of 3. You'll know more about this later. You don't need to remember that right now, but I'm just giving you an idea of how things are built up. Anyway, so nevertheless, then there's a paper 2, which is the options, and that is about abnormal psychology and developmental psychology, at least for my class. There's other perspectives, humanist, there's other stuff that you can do in there, but I don't do those. Okay? So anyway, here's the question. Let's go back to this. And the reason I mentioned that about the papers is because very often stuff about evolution comes up in an 8-point question. It's one of the shorter answer questions, SAQ, short answer question. You'll be knowing that very much near the time. But this comes up there. This is good to remember. Anyway, and so in this lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to get our very first study. That's important to remember. The thing about psychology is anything that you claim, anything that you state, you need to back it up with evidence from research. Remember, the biggest problem with Freud was he has no research. Well, that's why one of the reasons psychology looks like it does today. It's a science. You have to have research. You have to have evidence. You have to have support for your claims. So you need to really get it clear what these important studies are, and I will point them out to you. This is really important. Remember it. Okay, anyway, so this is the question right there. How much of our behavior is pre-programmed to ensure our survival? We're obviously very successful creatures on this planet. I mean, you can talk about human stupidity. Sure, there's that. But it's undeniable that we are the apex species on the planet, and we're successful. Okay? So there must be something that our behavior is successful. There must be something in our evolution that has helped facilitate this. So, evolutionary psychology, how behavior and abilities have developed to adapt us to our environment in a way that ensures our behavior. So, how has evolution adapted our behavior to ensure that we're going to survive? Because you can make an argument that, I mean, if we didn't, I mean, the people who didn't have a very adaptive behavior, who couldn't adapt and change or couldn't do whatever they needed to do, they died out. I mean, what happened to the Neanderthals? Obviously, we were a more successful species. There's lots of different theories about that are interesting. I mean, some people say we eradicated them. Some people will say that we just interbred so much. Lots of people have Neanderthal DNA that we just kind of, they turned into us type of thing. And nobody really knows the answer. There's just a bunch of theories. It doesn't really have anything to do with anything else. So, but it's an interesting sort of philosophical discussion. But biological-based mechanisms take in information, process it, and create a response. Okay? We have these biological-based mechanisms, like, for instance, speech, emotions, mating, aggression, altruism. Altruism is doing something when there's really no perceived benefit for yourself, at least direct benefit for yourself. There is an indirect benefit, for sure. Anyway, okay, so let's keep on going here, and we'll talk about what evolution actually is in terms of biological perspective in psychology. We know what it is, but let's take a look. Evolution. It's a change over time in the frequency of certain genes in a given population and the characteristics they produce, okay? Change over time in the frequency of certain genes. So, if we have certain genes that are more suited to our survival, well then, if in a change over time in the frequency of the population those are increased, then that's only beneficial for us. Okay, we know what natural selection is, so I'm not going to talk about it. Natural selection properties that raise the possibility of survival and subsequent reproduction have a greater probability of remaining in the population. Okay? If we have certain genes that increase our likelihood of survival and reproduction when they stay in our population, you guys know what it is, you've been to biology. And adaptation, it makes it possible for an organism to meet the demands from the environment, and as a result raises the chance of survival. Okay? So, animals develop fur. Animals who live in the northern hemisphere up in the north, they develop thick fur and lots of body fat, and it helps keep them alive. So that's beneficial, obviously. You guys know how this stuff works. Well, what about humans? We don't have any fur. We're actually pretty wimpy. We're wimpy. Almost anything can beat us up. Dogs can beat us up. Cats, little cats can't, but big cats, little cats can do some damage. But, big cats can beat us up, bears can beat us up, elephants can beat us up, giraffes can beat us up, everybody. A honey badger could beat us up, because they don't care. Honey badger don't give a... Anyway. So you see what I mean. So there must be something. Why are we so wimpy but so successful? Well, there's a lot of different things. Okay. You have different types of adaptations. Broad adaptation, learning a language, continuing behavior that is rewarded and avoided. This will be out on managebac. And so you'll be able to follow along there. I don't need to read every single word for word up here. But anyway, so specific adaptations exist to solve environmental specific problems such as securing safe food, avoiding spiders and snakes. There's a reason for instance, that we don't like creepy crawly things. I don't mean necessarily being phobic of spiders, like, scary spider. I don't necessarily mean that, but we don't like them. You don't want one in your bed at night. I told you before in class, but people didn't believe me, spiders drink your eye water. That's right, they drink your eye water when you sleep. Yeah, you ain't smirking now, are ya? That's right. You haven't experienced it, but I have. Okay, so what are the adaptations that make people people? It's a good question. What makes us us? Why are we different? What sort of human-specific adaptations do we have? Okay, this is it. The big one. The biggest, maybe. Language. And I've talked about this a little bit before. Everyone has an inborn ability to learn the language, even deaf people. Language is central to human thought and communication. Okay? Language is central to human thought and communication. I've talked before about the difference between animal communication and human language. Remember, the things are, human language is arbitrary, it's symbolic, it's never ending. Those are not animal language characteristics. Okay? Here's another one. Okay, so we are programmed to recognize and respond to human faces arranged in a particular way, in a specific way. Now there's a video that I'm going to link in the video for this below, and I want you guys to watch the video. It talks about facial recognition. Human beings at a very, very young age respond to facial recognition. They don't recognize the face, but they recognize it is a face. Now, how do they do this? I'll talk about this in a minute. But how do they do this? How do they know that human beings at a very, very young age respond to a face? Well, the video that you guys are going to watch is going to show you that. I'll explain it in a diagram that's coming up very soon. Okay. Anyway, when they're only a week old, babies can differentiate between 2 and 3 objects, apparently. This one doesn't seem as conclusive to me, but, some for a mathematical function. And generally, human beings develop, even from a very, very young age, a fear of social disapproval. They don't like to be excluded from the group, or put away from the group. Now, a very, very effective way to discipline children, and I'm sure your parents probably did that to you, I know mine did to me, was you go away, basically. They didn't go away. They're like, you, go sit in your room. Now as a teenager, you're like, thank you. But when you're young, kids say, no, you don't get to sit at the table. If you're gonna eat like that, or you're gonna behave like that, you don't get to sit at the table with us. Bam. Or you go to your room and until you calm down, you stay away from us. Oh, kids hate it. We are very, 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 very social creatures. We are incredibly social. Now you can say, no, I'm an introvert. No, sure. Okay, maybe. That doesn't mean you want to go out to, the pub and party all night long. You're not even 21, you can't even do that. But but the idea is that we have our social groups and we very much like to belong to them. This is a very, very human characteristic. Other animals too, for that matter. But it's very specific to human how social we actually are. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about a certain study, and I think I'll probably do that study, and let's see where I'm at in the video time. No, I got a little more time. I'm actually going pretty quickly here. But anyway, this is France. What was the year here? Anyway, okay. I'm going to put this up there, like I always do, and it's going to come up there in 3, 2, 1. Pow. Pretty cool, huh? That's right. Okay, so this is France, 1961. France, 1961. FRANTZ. And you have face shapes. So here's basically what I did. This is the very, very first study that I'm going to introduce to you guys. And this is a good one to remember. Just remember this study. Just remember, we'll refer to it again and again and again as time goes on. But just remember it. And the baby video that the video that I'm linking in here kind of does a better version of this France study. And you can see exactly how it's happening, how they test these different things for the babies and facial recognition. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, so here's what they do basically. They can't ask a baby because the baby doesn't speak, but they'll take a baby when it's only about a month old or something like that. I think this is 2 months old or something like that. Very, very young, all right? And they've done this with even younger kids, but they'll put an image in front of the baby's face. And you know how babies are, like, rubberneck. All right? I got a heavy helmet on, so I have an excuse. So anyway, so they'll put the different images up, and they'll time how much attention a baby gives to a particular image. So you have a couple of different general forms of faces here. You have Easter egg head face, right? You have Pablo Picasso head face, where you generally see the facial features, but it's all weirded out, like. And then you have Charlie Chaplin looking face. And obviously, it's very clear that Charlie Chaplin looking face looks a lot more like a face than Pablo Picasso face. And then Pablo Picasso face looks even more like a face than Easter egg face. Okay? And so what happens is they put these images up in front of the baby, like they'll put them side by side with one another. And maybe like Pablo Picasso face with egg face and whatever, you guys get it. And so then they'll look where the baby looks. And what they found is the babies always looked more at the real face. They looked at the real face more than they looked at Pablo Picasso face and more than they looked at Easter egg face. And this is before there was really any time to socialize that. And this is what's interesting, and it shows that there's an inborn just hardwire for facial recognition. And this makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Just for a second. Why is that so important, facial recognition? Well, this is how we read one another. Our face is how we read one another. Nobody even notices anybody's elbows. And when we look at the face, it's the eyes, it's the facial expressions. And I'm going to show you a diagram later that kind of illustrates this a little bit more, but I'm going to just keep it at this one for now. But we have, and if we're talking about places that are allocated to, okay, your brain is not one unitary store. It's not like your brain does everything. Different parts of the brain do different things. So there's part of the brain which, is the feeling for my fingers. There's part of the brain which is the feeling for my leg. There's part of the brain. So they have pretty much mapped out everything in the brain. We know exactly where different things are going on in the brain. Now, the largest parts of places that deal with movement, stuff like this, like voluntary movement and sensory stuff, the largest parts of our brain, the most area of the brain is dedicated to the face. So, I mean, anyway, so I'm not going to put up the images right now, but if you were to if you were to show a person, actually, you know what? I'm just going to put up the images, so because it's easier to talk about when I get there. This is way up here, but I'll just show you anyway. So this is it. This is a good image, and that'll go up here right now. Boom. Okay? And if you take a look at that really absurd looking guy, okay? And there's actually a thing in the book about this too. But if you take a look at that absurd looking guy with a massive head and massive hands, well, that is just a percentual representation of how we would look if the percent of our brain, the area of our brain dealing with the stuff, if the percent of that brain was made up in our physical characteristics. What it means is I have a lot more of my brain developed to facial stuff. Movement of my mouth, movement of my tongue, movement of my eyes, and I can move all kinds of things all over my face. My face has a massive amounts of muscles in there. And there's no other part of your body that is as able to do stuff. And our hands are really, really important too. So most of a very large part of our brain is dedicated to that. And so let me go back, if that makes sense. We'll talk about that more. I'm not done with that right now. But so let me go back to where I was, and then I'll finish up with this lesson. Okay, so let me go back to here. All right, there we go. And so it makes sense, since we have so much of our brain dedicated to the face, it makes sense that we're going to be hardwired to recognize faces because the face is so important for our survival. We have to be able to read faces. We have to be able to understand this communication. And monkeys have this as well. Monkeys have massive facial expressions. They're not the same as human beings either. I've learned that on my own by smiling at baby monkeys, and just basically got attacked by the mother monkey. Thankfully, she jumped on a fence first. But she was like, go away, and quit smiling at my baby monkeys. She didn't like it. And so, we're not monkeys. But anyway, so that's the idea. Let me do one last little thing here. And then two last little things. And then what we'll do is I will stop this lesson and I will do another one. Then I'm going to get back to some R&R. That's right. Spend all my R&R teaching psychology. That's ridiculous. Never mind. More adaptations that are very human. Cooperation and belonging to a group is central for our survival. We cooperate really, really well. Better than any other species on this planet, without a doubt. The ability of us to cooperate is paramount to our survival. Now we say we fight and blah, blah, blah. But yes, but the cooperation that we have has built the society. And it's amazing. No other animal even remotely close. I mean, animals hunt together and do stuff like that and share food, and there's, but this level of cooperation, no way. Okay? And we don't like being cast out of the group. We hate it. You can say, I'm an introvert, like I said before, but people hate being rejected from the group. Whatever group you feel you belong to, you don't want to be rejected from it. Very central human. Basic emotions are universal to all human culture. The basic emotions we have: laughter, anger, fright, surprise, these sorts of things. The same facial expressions all over the world can be interpreted to mean exactly what they mean. It doesn't matter where you are. It's not like the Chinese have one facial expression for being happy, and the Africans have one facial expression to be happy, and the Europeans have one facial expression to be happy. It's all the same. That's a very universal thing. It's one of the few absolute, well, there's quite a few cultural universals, but there aren't a zillion of them. I mean, our cultures bring a lot of different things together. Anyway, and this is kind of interesting, violence. Violence is kind of an adaptation, obviously. All creatures need to be able to be violent to survive. It's just part of it, from a squirrel to a mouse to a lion to a bobo chimpanzee to us. But this is kind of interesting. A man-on-man violence is 30-1 compared to woman-on-woman violence. The amount of violence that men do to other men is, they say, 30-1 over what women do to women. It's a lot of violence. By the way, the most dangerous place statistically that you can be as a young man is outside of a pub at closing time. Yes. That's where the most violence statistically occurs, because people get all liquored up and they get all mouthy, and then they start getting in fights and shootouts and concussions and all kinds of stuff like that. Okay? And then one last one for this lesson. Altruism. Helping others with little obvious benefit to oneself. Okay? Increases with relatedness. We are more altruistic to people who we are related to. And I don't mean that somebody you're close contact with, but let's just say it's a cousin or something, or an aunt or something like that. We're more likely to help this person, even though we never see them. You maybe see your friends, or you maybe see people in school or whatever. Well, when we had school, but you maybe see certain people like at work a lot more often than do your aunt or your cousin. But you're going to be a lot more willing to help your aunt and cousin than you are the person at work. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. It's more prevalent when the target of altruism is a child. So if there's a kid that needs the help, we're really happy to help somebody who's more helpless. And then reasoning that by helping the in-group, it secures one's own gene pool. And this is the idea. So why do we help the in-group? Why do we help our group? Well, it's a benefit for me. It's a benefit, and I'm not thinking that or calculating that, but it's a benefit for me to help my own gene pool, because it facilitates reproduction. And people are very altruistic towards one another. Now, you can really debate the sort of philosophical if altruism actually exists, or it's just selfishness masked in nice deeds, but we won't do that right here. Okay? And so, but this is a big one. The higher you go up this sort of chain of primates, the more altruistic they become. And remember, we have to help. It's about cooperation too. We have to help one another to survive. Because, as I was saying before, everything can beat us up. Maybe not a mouse. A mouse can't beat us up. We can pretty much beat up a mouse. But, I mean, you guys see what I mean. In a rabbit, we can beat up a rabbit. But anything big can pretty much beat us up. So we have to be able to be altruistic and help one another, because otherwise we're pretty much doomed. And so it's very, very much a sort of evolutionary trait, this levels of altruism that we have. So those are some of the things. Next lesson, I'm going to look at some more adaptations in another study. But for now, that's right. Lesson is over. This soldier's going back to R&R. I hope that Betty Boop cartoon is still going to be played. And so, with that in mind, I'm going to hit it. That's right. And remember, if you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. And I'll find out. So I'm out.